Have you ever stopped in the middle of your day and questioned whether the thoughts running through your mind are actually yours? I mean, truly yours. Right now, as you're listening to these words, there's a voice narrating your experience, commenting on what you're hearing, maybe even judging whether this video is worth your time. But here's the unsettling question that Carl Jung spent decades exploring. What if that voice isn't really you at all? Think about it for a moment. That internal narrator you've been listening to your entire life, the one you've assumed represents your authentic self, might actually be a complex orchestra of different psychological forces, each one trying to grab the conductor's baton. Jung discovered something that fundamentally challenges everything we believe about consciousness and identity. He revealed that what we call thinking is actually more like a crowded marketplace, where fragments of our past, absorbed beliefs from our culture, desires that don't belong to us, and even archetypal forces from the collective unconscious are all competing for attention, all speaking in what sounds like your voice. But before we dive deeper into this mind-bending revelation, please hit the like button and let me know where in the world you're watching from today. It's always fascinating seeing who's joining us from around the globe. And if you haven't already, make sure to hit that subscribe button and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any of our future videos exploring the mysteries of consciousness and human psychology. Now here's where it gets really interesting. Has this ever happened to you? You're going about your normal routine when suddenly a thought appears that feels completely foreign, maybe even disturbing or out of character. For a split second, you catch yourself wondering, where did that come from? That's not really me. Most people dismiss these moments instantly, brushing them off as random mental noise. But what if those brief flashes of recognition are actually the most important moments in your psychological life? What if your authentic self is trying to wake you up, sending you signals that you're not alone in your own head? Jung described consciousness as a battlefield, a territory where various aspects of the psyche wage constant war for dominance. The tragedy is that most people never even realize there's a battle happening. They simply identify with whatever voice is loudest, whatever thought pattern is most repetitive, whatever emotional current is strongest. They go through their entire lives, never questioning whose desires they're actually pursuing, whose fears are really speaking, whose ambitions are genuinely driving their choices. They mistake the loudest voice for truth, the most persistent pattern for identity. Stay with me here, because what you're about to discover might completely transform how you understand yourself. This isn't just abstract psychology or philosophical speculation. This is about recognizing that you might be living someone else's life, pursuing goals that were planted in your psyche by external forces, making decisions based on programming you didn't even know existed. Until you understand the true architecture of consciousness, you remain a passenger in your own mind, watching your life unfold as if it's happening to someone else. So the question becomes, who's really in control? And this is where Jung's revelations become truly transformative. He showed us that consciousness isn't this neat, organized stream flowing in one direction. It's actually a complex intersection, a crossroads where multiple psychological forces converge simultaneously. Imagine standing at the center of a busy junction where your eternal soul, your temporary personality, memories from countless past experiences, beliefs you've absorbed from your environment, and even deeper archetypal influences from the collective unconscious are all trying to move through at the same time. That's what's happening in your mind right now, in this very moment. The truth is, the voice in your head is actually a chorus. Multiple singers, each with their own agenda, their own history, their own intensity. And here's the hidden truth that most people never discover. Your authentic self, that divine spark that is genuinely you, often has to shout just to be heard over the psychological noise. It's like trying to have a meaningful conversation at a crowded party, where everyone's talking over each other. Your true voice gets drowned out by competing forces, by internalized critics, by outdated programming, by fears that don't even belong to you. Now, I want to go even deeper into this revelation, because understanding this completely changes your relationship with your own mind. Take a moment and actually examine your inner dialogue. Really look at it. How much of what runs through your mind each day is genuine, original thinking, and how much is just repetitive worry playing on loop? How much mental energy do you waste rehearsing conversations that will never happen, planning defenses against attacks that will never come, or replaying scenarios from your past that you can't change? If you haven't subscribed yet, I'd love to have you join this community. I create content for people who are serious about understanding consciousness and living authentically. Hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss these deeper explorations. Here's where the transformation begins. Jung discovered that we unconsciously adopt thought patterns from authority figures who shaped us during our formative years. That critical voice telling you you're not good enough? Listen closely to its tone, its specific words. Doesn't it sound suspiciously like something a parent once said? That anxious voice catastrophizing about the future. Maybe it's actually your grandmother's fear, passed down and internalized so deeply you think it's your own instinct. Those limiting beliefs about what you can or cannot achieve. They might be your teacher's doubts, your culture's limitations, your society's conditioning, all speaking in what you've mistaken for your own voice. This is the journey of awakening that Jung mapped out for us. It's not about eliminating these voices, it's about recognizing them, understanding their origin, and making conscious decisions about which ones deserve your attention and which ones need to be gently set aside. The impact of this awareness cannot be overstated. When you realize that most of your mental activity isn't authentically yours, you suddenly have access to a level of freedom you've never experienced before. Write in the comments, I recognize these voices, if this resonates with your experience, because here's the devastating reality that Jung uncovered through decades of studying the human psyche. Many people are living entire lives according to desires and beliefs that don't actually belong to them. They're running someone else's race, chasing someone else's dreams, living out someone else's unlived life. Think about the career you're pursuing or the one you pursued. Is it genuinely your calling? Or did you absorb your father's unfulfilled ambitions? Did you take on his regrets and decide to live them out for him? Are you trying to heal his wounds through your own life choices? Or consider your relationships, your patterns around intimacy and connection. Jung would ask you to examine whether your fears are truly yours or if they're psychological imprints left by past betrayals, past wounds that carved neural pathways in your brain. Maybe you're avoiding vulnerability, not because you consciously choose to, but because somewhere deep in your unconscious, an old injury is still dictating your decisions. And what about that persistent anxiety you carry? That nameless dread that seems to follow you everywhere? Jung discovered that we're far more permeable than we realize. You might be experiencing anxiety that isn't even yours, emotions you've picked up from the collective atmosphere around you, absorbed from your family system, inherited from your culture's unprocessed trauma. This is the hidden truth that changes everything. People spend entire lifetimes chasing goals that have absolutely nothing to do with their true purpose simply because they never learn to separate the signal from the noise. They never develop the crucial ability to distinguish between their authentic self and the collection of internalized voices, social conditioning, and borrowed dreams that masquerade as their own desires. The impact on your life is profound. You could achieve everything society tells you to achieve and still feel empty because you're succeeding at someone else's game. But there's another layer to this revelation, one that offers genuine hope and transformation. Jung mapped out consciousness as existing in layers like geological strata in the earth. And at the deepest level, beneath all the noise and conditioning and borrowed beliefs, there exists what he called the superconscious or the higher self. This is your direct connection to something greater, to collective wisdom, to the divine intelligence that flows through all things. This is the realm where your soul's true knowing resides, where your genuine intuition lives, where your deepest wisdom waits patiently to be heard. Here's what makes this layer of consciousness so different from all the others. It speaks quietly, with absolute certainty, but without any force or urgency. It doesn't shout, it doesn't demand, it doesn't generate anxiety or fear to get your attention. That's actually how you can recognize it. While all those borrowed voices are loud, repetitive, and emotionally charged, your true self whispers with calm authority. It knows, and it doesn't need to convince you. The journey toward hearing this voice requires a fundamental shift in your mindset, a willingness to question everything you've assumed about yourself. Drop a comment saying, "I'm ready to listen," if you're committed to this transformation. But understanding the higher self is only part of the picture. We need to explore what Jung called the subconscious mind, because this is where most of your daily decisions are actually being made. Think of the subconscious as a vast storehouse, an enormous archive containing every single memory from your life, every experience you've had, every word spoken to you, every emotion felt. This is where your habits live, where your ingrained patterns reside, where your automatic responses are stored like programs running in the background of your mind. Here's the revelation that changes your entire relationship with yourself. The subconscious doesn't judge, it doesn't evaluate, it doesn't distinguish between what's helpful and what's harmful. It simply records everything and plays it back on demand. If someone told you at age 7 that you were worthless, that message got recorded. And the subconscious doesn't care that it was said by an angry parent having a bad day, or that it has no basis in reality. It just files it away and replays it whenever a similar situation triggers that memory. If you experienced a traumatic event, the subconscious logged every detail, every sensation, every emotion, and now it generates fears and anxieties that seem to come from nowhere. Protective responses to dangers that no longer exist. Jung used a powerful metaphor for this. He said the subconscious is like an immense library containing millions of books, but there's no librarian. There's no one organizing what's valuable versus what's destructive, no system separating truth from fiction, wisdom from conditioning. Everything just accumulates. That childhood belief that you're not smart enough sits right next to your genuine talents. That trauma from a relationship 20 years ago occupies the same mental space as your capacity for love today. The subconscious holds everything but discriminates nothing, and this creates a massive challenge for your growth and transformation. Because here's where your power actually resides. There's another layer Jung identified, one that most people vastly underestimate, the conscious mind. This is the aspect of yourself you're most familiar with, the part that's processing these words right now, the voice that's aware it's aware. Jung described the conscious mind as the choosing mechanism, the one part of your psyche that has genuine free will. Its essential job, its primary function, is to act as a filter. Among the thousands upon thousands of thoughts, memories, and impulses bubbling up from that massive subconscious storehouse every single moment, your conscious mind gets to decide which ones deserve your attention and which ones should be dismissed. This is where the real work happens, where transformation becomes possible. Most people never realize they have this power. They treat every thought that appears as if it's important, as if it's true, as if it demands their response. But that's not how it works. Your conscious mind is supposed to be the gatekeeper, the discerning intelligence that evaluates what rises from below and makes deliberate decisions about what gets amplified and what gets ignored. Type "I choose consciously" if you're beginning to see how this changes everything. But here's where most people encounter their biggest obstacle. They never actually train their conscious mind to perform this crucial discriminating function. Instead, they just identify with whatever thought happens to be loudest, whatever pattern is most repetitive, whatever emotion is most intense. They assume that because a thought appears frequently or feels strong, it must be important or true. That's not consciousness operating at its full capacity, that's being hijacked by unconscious forces. The untrained mind is like a boat without a rudder, swept along by whatever psychological current happens to be strongest in that moment. Think about how you typically interact with your thoughts. When anxiety shows up, do you question it, examine its origin, evaluate whether it's based on reality? Or do you just become it, letting it dictate your entire emotional state? When a critical voice starts attacking you, do you pause and ask whose voice that really is, where it learned those specific words? Or do you simply accept the criticism as objective truth? This lack of training, this absence of conscious discrimination, is why so many people feel like victims of their own minds. They've never learned to operate the control panel. Now, I want to reveal something even more profound that Jung discovered about the nature of consciousness itself. Your mind isn't actually sealed inside your skull like we've been taught. You're not this isolated individual thinking private thoughts in a vacuum. Jung's work revealed that we exist in an ocean of thought forms, in a field of psychological vibrations and influences that come from what he called the collective unconscious. This changes everything about how we understand mental and emotional states. Every time someone thinks about you with strong emotion, whether it's love, anger, worry, or resentment, that thought has actual psychological reality. It creates ripples in the invisible field we all share, and those ripples impact your mental state in ways you've probably never recognized. That inexplicable heaviness you sometimes feel for no apparent reason, it might not be yours. That sudden shift in mood when you're around certain people or in certain places, you're picking up on energetic signatures, psychological imprints that exist in the environment around you. Jung documented how every time you enter a space where violence occurred, where deep suffering happened, where intense emotions were experienced, those psychological imprints don't just disappear. They remain in the atmosphere, encoded in the very fabric of that location, and they can profoundly affect your mental state if you're not aware of what's happening. This is why some places feel heavy, while others feel light. Why certain environments drain your energy, while others restore it. You're not imagining these sensations. You're responding to real psychological forces that most people don't even know exist. The hidden truth here is that without psychological protection, without self-awareness, without understanding these dynamics, you're constantly being influenced by archetypal forces and collective energies that shape your thinking without your conscious knowledge. The impact on your daily decisions, your emotional states, your sense of self is enormous. Comment "I feel the energy" if you've experienced these invisible influences. But here's the revelation that offers genuine liberation. The solution isn't to fear these influences or to live in paranoia about what might be affecting you. The solution is actually remarkably simple, yet profoundly powerful. Recognition itself diminishes the power these forces have over you. Awareness is protective. The moment you can identify what's influencing your consciousness, you instantly regain agency over your mental state. You shift from being a passive recipient of psychological currents to becoming an active participant who can choose how to respond. This is the transformation Jung pointed toward throughout all his work. When you become aware that a particular emotion isn't actually yours, that you picked it up from someone else or absorbed it from your environment, that awareness alone creates distance. Suddenly, you're not drowning in the emotion anymore. You're observing it, understanding its source, and that changes everything. You move from being a victim to being a witness, and witnesses have power that victims don't. So how do you actually develop this discriminating awareness? How do you learn to distinguish between the voice of your true self and all the other voices clamoring for attention? Jung gave us specific markers, distinct characteristics we can use to identify which voice is genuinely ours. Your authentic self, that deepest layer of wisdom within you, speaks in the present moment. It's not caught in endless loops replaying the past or spinning anxious fantasies about the future. It's here, now, responding to what actually is rather than what was or what might be. And here's something crucial. The voice of your true self feels peaceful, even when it's directing you toward difficult action, even when it's calling you to do something that scares you. There's a calm certainty to it, a groundedness that doesn't generate panic or urgency. It never degrades you. It never attacks others. It consistently aligns with growth, with love, with service, with your highest potential. When you hear this voice, it feels like coming home, like remembering something you always knew, but temporarily forgot. The false voices, the borrowed patterns, the conditioning, the fears that don't belong to you, they have completely different signatures. They're repetitive, often using the exact same phrases over and over like broken records stuck in a groove. They're frequently critical, attacking either yourself or other people. They generate intense emotion, usually fear, shame, or anger, because that's how they capture and hold your attention. They speak in absolutes, in black and white extremes. You always fail. You'll never change. Everyone thinks you're inadequate. These voices deal in certainties that eliminate nuance, in generalizations that deny complexity. Learning to recognize these patterns is like developing a new sense, acquiring a skill that fundamentally alters your relationship with your own mind. The impact on your journey toward authentic living cannot be overstated. Write, "I'm learning to discern," if this distinction is becoming clearer for you. Because once you start recognizing these patterns, Jung offered a beautifully simple yet profound test you can apply in real time. Whenever a thought appears in your consciousness, ask yourself this question: does this thought lead me toward love or toward fear? Does it make me feel connected to something greater than myself, or does it create a sense of separation and isolation? Does it encourage expansion and growth, or does it promote contraction and retreat? This isn't abstract philosophy. This is a practical tool you can use dozens of times throughout your day. Your true self, that authentic core of who you really are, will always, without exception, point you toward love. It will always encourage growth, even when growth is uncomfortable. It will always foster connection, even when connection feels risky. It will always align you with your higher nature, with your potential, with the person you came here to become. Any voice pointing in the opposite direction, any thought generating fear, separation, or contraction is suspect. It might be conditioning, it might be trauma, it might be an absorbed belief, but it's not your authentic wisdom speaking. Now, I want to reveal something that completely transforms how you understand this entire process. You're not just passively trying to identify which thoughts are true and which are false. You're not simply sorting through a fixed collection of mental content. You're actively creating and refining your consciousness itself. Every single time you consciously choose to give your attention to a thought aligned with your higher nature, and every time you consciously dismiss a thought aligned with fear or limitation, you are literally, physically rewiring your neural pathways. You're strengthening certain connections in your brain while letting others atrophy. The mind is not static. It's not a fixed structure you're stuck with. Your consciousness is constantly being shaped, molded, reformed by what you Consistently feed it by what patterns you habitually reinforce, by where you repeatedly place your attention. This is where Jung's teachings become radically empowering, where the journey shifts from understanding to action. You are not a victim of your thoughts. You are not at the mercy of your conditioning. You are the gardener of your own consciousness. Think about that metaphor for a moment. A gardener doesn't just observe what grows. A gardener makes active decisions about what to plant, what to water, what to cultivate, and what to remove. But here's the hidden truth about most people's mental gardens. They've never picked up the tools. They've never learned how to garden. They've just let everything grow wild, and now they're genuinely surprised that their mental landscape is overrun with weeds, that destructive patterns have taken over, that the beautiful fruits they hoped would appear never materialized. The impact of this realization should hit you with force. Everything in your mind right now, every dominant thought pattern, every recurring emotion, every habitual response is there because you've been watering it. Comment, "I'm taking the tools," if you're ready to become the gardener of your own mind. So let's get brutally honest for a moment. What have you actually been cultivating in your mental garden? Take a real inventory of where your attention has been going day after day, month after month, year after year. How much time do you spend dwelling on resentments, keeping old grudges alive by rehearsing them in your mind? How much energy goes into replaying old wounds, having imaginary arguments with people from your past, reliving moments where you felt hurt or humiliated? How often do you catch yourself imagining worst-case scenarios, catastrophizing about things that haven't happened and probably never will? And what about the constant stream of criticism? How much of your mental activity is dedicated to judging yourself, attacking your own worth, cataloging your failures and inadequacies, or turning that same critical lens outward, mentally tearing down other people, finding fault, comparing yourself in ways that either inflate your ego or reinforce your sense of inferiority? These aren't random thoughts that occasionally pass through. These are seeds you've been watering daily, sometimes hourly, giving them your precious attention and emotional energy. And they've grown into robust thought patterns, into psychological habits, so deeply ingrained that they now feel like just the way I am, like immutable aspects of your personality, rather than cultivated crops you can choose to stop feeding. But here's where Jung's teachings offer the pathway to genuine transformation. He showed us that the spiritual path, the journey toward becoming who you actually are, beneath all the conditioning, is fundamentally about becoming conscious of consciousness itself. It's about learning to observe your thoughts without automatically identifying with every single one of them. This requires recognizing something that sounds simple, but represents perhaps the most radical shift a human being can make. You are not your thoughts. You are the awareness in which thoughts appear. Let that sink in for a moment, because most people completely miss this distinction. They've spent their entire lives assuming they are the stream of thoughts flowing through their mind. But if you can observe a thought, if you can watch it arise and pass away, then you must be something other than that thought. You don't say, "I am a tree," when you observe a tree outside your window. The tree is something you're aware of, something appearing in your field of perception, but it's not you. So why do you say, "I am anxious," when you observe an anxious thought moving through your consciousness? Why the identification? This observer, this witness consciousness that can watch thoughts without being consumed by them, is actually much closer to your true self than any of the thoughts you're witnessing. It's the stable ground beneath the constantly shifting weather patterns of your mental activity. And recognizing this, really understanding it at an experiential level rather than just an intellectual one, changes your entire relationship with your inner world. You begin to have space between stimulus and response, between a thought appearing and your reaction to it. The impact of developing this observer consciousness cannot be overstated. It's The difference between being tossed around by every wave and learning to stand on solid ground while the waves crash around you. Type, I am the observer, if this perspective shift is starting to happen for you. Because once you establish yourself as the observer, once you create that crucial distance between awareness and thought, something extraordinary becomes possible. You begin to have real choice, actual agency. When you can watch your thoughts without being immediately swept away by them, you can see a fear-based thought arise and consciously decide not to believe it. You can witness it appear, recognize its pattern, understand its source, and then simply refuse to give it power. You can observe it pass through like a cloud moving across the sky without letting it dictate your actions, determine your mood, or define your reality. This is where transformation moves from theory to lived experience. You can notice those childhood conditioning patterns showing up, those old scripts, playing, and instead of unconsciously following them like you always have, you can pause and choose to think differently. You can catch yourself about to repeat a destructive behavior and actually make a different decision in real time. This isn't about positive thinking or affirmations. This is about developing genuine sovereignty over your own consciousness. But Jung was uncompromising about something crucial here, something most people desperately want to avoid. This entire process requires brutal honesty about your current state. Not the story you tell yourself about who you are, not the image you project to others or the identity you've carefully constructed. The actual truth of what's happening in your consciousness moment to moment. You cannot change what you refuse to see. You cannot transform patterns you won't acknowledge. And this is where most people's journey towards self-knowledge stalls out completely. Because when you actually look, when you really examine the contents of your consciousness with unflinching honesty, what you find is usually a mess of contradictions. People claim to value peace while spending hours every day mentally rehearsing arguments, planning their defense against imagined attacks, replaying conflicts on an endless loop. They say they want love and connection, while their inner dialogue is constantly judging others, finding fault, comparing, criticizing. They insist they're committed to growth, while their dominant thoughts are excuses, justifications, and reasons why change is impossible. The gap between who you claim to be and what's actually running through your mind all day, that gap is where your real work lives. That's where genuine transformation happens or doesn't happen based on your willingness to see clearly. Now, I want to address something Jung considered one of the greatest spiritual dangers of the modern age: idle mental activity. We live in an era of unprecedented stimulation, of perpetual distraction. Most people fill every single spare moment with input, scrolling, watching, listening, consuming endless streams of content. They're terrified of silence, of empty space, of being alone with their own consciousness. And there's a reason for that fear. Because when you finally stop drowning out your awareness with external noise, when you actually sit in silence and examine what's there, what you find is often deeply uncomfortable. The hidden truth behind the scenes of all that frantic distraction is that people are running from themselves. Right, I'm willing to look if you're ready to face what's really there. They're running because when the noise finally stops, they'll have to confront the reality that they might be living the wrong life entirely. Because here's what Jung discovered through his work with thousands of people. Your soul came into this incarnation with a specific purpose. There's a mission it intended to accomplish, lessons it needed to learn, gifts it meant to share with the world. But your personality, your ego, the constructed self you present to society, often has completely different plans. Plans based on what culture told you success should look like, what your wounds taught you to avoid at all costs, what your fears convinced you was necessary for safety and survival. And this creates an internal war that most people never consciously recognize. Your soul is pulling you in one direction, whispering about paths that genuinely matter, while your conditioned self is pulling in another direction entirely, chasing goals that look impressive but feel empty. The tragedy is that your personality usually wins this battle because its voice is louder, more insistent, backed by social approval and the illusion of security. But winning this battle means losing something far more precious. It means spending your finite time here pursuing someone else's definition of a life well lived. Right now, in this very moment, your soul is trying to communicate with you. It's been trying your entire life. It speaks through those deepest longings you're almost afraid to admit, even to yourself. The ones that feel too big, too impractical, too far removed from your current reality. It speaks through your inexplicable attractions to certain types of work, certain places, certain ways of serving others that don't make logical sense but feel absolutely right. It speaks through your dissatisfaction with accomplishments that should make you happy but leave you feeling hollow. It speaks through synchronicities that seem too perfect to be coincidence, through dreams that carry emotional weight you can't quite shake, through those moments when you just know something without being able to explain how. But what do most people do with these communications? They dismiss them. They silence their soul's voice, treating it like an impractical child who doesn't understand how the real world works. They choose what seems safer, more financially secure, more socially acceptable. They follow the path their parents approve of, the career that impresses others, the lifestyle that looks successful on social media. And then they wonder why, despite checking all the conventional boxes, they feel this persistent sense that something essential is missing. Jung posed the ultimate question that cuts through all the rationalizations and comfortable lies. Whose life are you actually living? Not whose life do you claim to be living, but when you honestly examine your goals, your daily choices, your priorities, whose voice are you truly following? Is it your soul's authentic calling, or is it a collection of absorbed shoulds, fear-based decisions, and paths chosen primarily to please or impress others? Because here's the devastating reality Jung confronted people with. You can be wildly successful by the world's standards while being a complete failure at your soul's actual mission. You can have wealth, status, recognition, all the external markers of achievement, and still arrive at the end of your life having never done what you came here to do. Comment, living my truth, if you're committed to answering your soul's call. That's the journey we're all on, whether we're conscious of it or not. The question is simply whether you'll continue sleepwalking through someone else's script, or finally wake up to the voice that's been waiting patiently beneath all the noise. If you made it this far, I genuinely appreciate you being here. These aren't easy conversations to have, and the fact that you stayed with me through this entire exploration tells me something important about you. You're someone who's genuinely seeking, who's willing to question, who's ready to look beneath the surface of conventional answers. That's rare, and it matters. If this resonated with you, if something here sparked recognition or opened a door you didn't know was there, do me a favor and hit that like button. It helps this message reach others who might need to hear it, people on their own journey toward authentic living who are looking for these kinds of insights. And leave a comment saying, "This message was meant for me," so I know you made it all the way through. I read every comment, and there's something powerful about declaring your commitment to this path, even in such a simple way. It creates accountability, marks a moment of decision. If you haven't subscribed yet, I'd love to have you join this community. I create content designed to challenge, to awaken, to provide genuine value for people who are serious about understanding consciousness and living authentically. This isn't surface-level material. It's for people ready to do the real work. And speaking of which, There's a video right here that goes even deeper into how to actually implement these insights, how to begin the practical work of reclaiming your consciousness. Click and continue with me over there. Let's keep this journey going together.